the things that I like to do as we get towards the end of the year is make predictions about what's going to happen to the vinyl industry in the upcoming year. And then the other thing I like to do is make resolutions. So, like personal goals for me related to this hobby heading into next year. And so that's what we're going to cover today. I'm both going to cover predictions and resolutions, but I'm also going to give you an update on the predictions and resolutions that I made last year. I don't know that I made a video on it last year, but I definitely put it out there on Instagram. So anyway, I wanted to cover that so that you can get a sense of I guess whether I'm living up to any of my goals that I set for myself. So before we get started, as always, hit like, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified every time I post a video. And you can head over to Instagram and follow me at what_can_brown. First of all, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, but real quick, I'm obviously not in my record room, and actually I'm not at my primary home either. And so I wanted to at least acknowledge the fact that I'm in a different space, but this will not, I don't think I'm going to be making too many videos from here, but here, end of the year, over the holidays, this just happened to be the situation. So I hope you can trust that I can speak intelligently about vinyl without actually having walls of vinyl behind me. So to give you an idea of some of the predictions that I've made in the past, because I pay attention to what's going on in this industry pretty closely, I would say. I'm like a marketing person anyway, by trade, by profession, and so I tend to focus on some of the trends, and I inevitably I come up with predictions of what I think is going to happen. So to give you an idea, at the end of 2022, right, so 2 years ago, some of the predictions that I made were that labels such as Muse, Milestone, and Cobblestone were going to enjoy a resurgence, that more people were going to discover them and that values would increase. And the reason why I made that prediction is because there was so much energy being placed on Blue Note and Prestige. And it really felt like the prices for some of these desirable titles were just simply getting too high. And so all of these people that were coming into the sort of jazz vinyl community were going to have to look elsewhere if they were going to find titles that were affordable and that they could get. So I don't know necessarily in 2022 if those specific labels, say, went up, at a greater rate in terms of desirability and value than, say, perhaps another label like, I don't know, Riverside or Savoy or some of these other ones, right? But one of the things that we have seen, especially looking back, is that over the last 2 years, these labels, among others, have really gone up in value. And so that one ended up kind of being, you could say that's an easy prediction to make, but it was something that I remember thinking about, that I, put out there on Instagram, and that at least now 2 years later, at least at some point during that time, I feel like that's happened. And I do think that that's going to continue to happen, that some of these lesser known labels, to some extent, to the extent that there's still some of these lesser known labels even around that people aren't aware of or as aware of, I do think that that's going to continue to happen. My 2023 stuff was a couple of things. I was expecting sonically lower quality reissues. So what I believe to be the case is that the market was just growing so fast. Every label wanted a piece of it, and they were going to essentially flood the market with lower quality titles overall, and that there'd be a ton of them, like larger pressing quantities. I also expected that there'd be a deprioritization of jazz from the reissue companies simply because they don't sell as much as some of the rock stuff. And then finally, my other prediction for 2023 was that the prices of vintage records would relax overall, but not for the top quality original pressings. So those were some of the predictions that I made for this past year, this year that we're just finishing out with. So what I would say about that is I do think that there have been some sonically lower quality reissues, but fortunately, there's also a number of labels that have kind of fixed some of the issues that they had in the past. I think that the expectations of some of these pressing plants are higher right now than perhaps they were a couple of years ago. And it feels like a lot of the quality issues are getting worked out, which I think is really, really good. Now, what I will say is that there are the sort of introduction of labels that either they're licensing catalogs or they have their own catalogs, that they're putting this stuff out and it isn't the best quality. And I think that what Third Man did with the Verve by Request series is an example of that, although I don't necessarily know how many others that I can point to, at least in the jazz space. But I do think that there are some sonically lower quality reissues, and I think the expectations of buyers have increased to where everything really does need to be perfect. I hear from people all the time about returning vinyl because there's like a very mild dish warp or because there's like a little tiny mark that doesn't even sound in the vinyl. That is, I know there's a lot of people that play that game that, right, that it's like, I'm spending money, I expect this to be perfection. And that is, I find it personally to be a little bit extreme. Maybe I let labels get away with too much in terms of purchasing a product and not having it arrive in absolutely perfect shape. For example, I buy a lot of new, new reissues and new music. I have not returned a single title in over a year. I think I returned a title last year because it warped in transit and it was literally unplayable. But otherwise, I'm just not, I guess I'm not as particular as a lot of other folks when it comes to this stuff. So anyway, I think with those high expectations and the fact that there's some labels that are issuing lower quality stuff, those two things kind of seem to come to a head this year. But I don't necessarily know that the entire market was like flooded with sonically lower quality reissues. So that part didn't really come true, I suppose. In terms of the deprioritization of jazz from reissue companies, I don't know that necessarily that one came about either. I mean, I think what we do see are, especially by like MoFi and even just the Atlantic 75 series that was put out in partnership with Acoustic Sounds, that there does seem to be more of a focus on rock titles versus jazz. And let's be real, those audiences or the audience of folks who are interested in the rock stuff outnumbers jazz. It just does. I don't have the exact percentages, but I know that that's the case. So, I think that this is one actually that could be brought into 2024 as a prediction as well, and I'll kind of get into that in just a second. So the other comment that I made was that the prices of vintage records would relax, but not for top quality original pressings. So think back to January. The situation that we were all observing was falling prices of records, of vintage records. And there was a lot of people who were freaking out about it because it really felt like the price of vintage records was only going up over the last several years leading up to about January of this year. Like going up significantly too. It was almost like you could buy a record and a couple of months later sell it for more money. And what we saw this year was a little bit flattening out. So certainly, I don't think that the price of vintage records, the values went up at all in 2023. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a couple of titles I'm sure that sort of had a resurgence, whether it was because of a reissue or simply because it ended up being like a hot thing for the year. But overall, I don't think, like, for example, that Blue Note originals went up in value in 2023. And again, this is not my industry. I don't exist in the music space and I don't study this stuff, but this is just like the sense that I get from being an avid buyer and somebody who pays attention a lot to this stuff. So what it feels like to me is that certainly prices didn't continue to go up. I don't think that they went down for, again, that those, like, say, a near mint or an excellent condition Blue Note record. I do think, though, that the price of, say, your run-of-the-mill jazz record, I think it did go down. I think anything that was like VG plus and lower, I think might have gone down in value this year, even slightly. Probably more of the impact was felt at the lower end of the quality. Because for a time it was almost like you could spend $400 on a G plus record if it was sufficiently rare. And I don't know that that's really happening as much, except for maybe a couple of these sellers that are particularly active on eBay. All right, so this is what I think for 2024. What I think is we're going to start to see weaker growth in the vinyl market compared to, say, other year-over-year periods, right? So between 2022 and 2023, whatever happened in terms of growth, I don't think it's going to grow as fast next year compared to this year. And what I think is going to happen is that record labels are going to have to make a decision about how they're going to react to that, right? So the expectation of businesses is that you continue to grow, right? It's not just doing well is not defined by getting the exact same revenue as you did the year before or selling the same number of units as you did the year before. You have to show growth in order for it to be, a business that people want to invest in. So if if we're not going to see the vinyl market growing as much, don't get me wrong, I think it's still going to grow, but it's not going to grow like as much as it has. I think record labels are going to have to start making decisions about how they react to this. So there's a couple of things you could do, right? They could decide to find new customers. So try to bring even more people to the vinyl hobby, right? Not just can't just cater to those folks who are already in this hobby, especially if some of us are going to be spending less money on vinyl next year. And I think that that's definitely a thing. Um, so they're going to have to find new customers is one lever that they can pull, right? So they can go to different international markets. They can prioritize genres that maybe they've paid less attention to in the past, and I think we've already started to see that. Um, I think that if they can't find new customers, or maybe in addition to that, one of the other things that they could do is focus more on mass appeal titles and less attention on lower appeal titles. So what I mean by that is, why release like Strata East stuff, for example, when you could put out that next reissue of a Steely Dan record, right? Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of us folks in jazz who are clamoring for some of these reissues, but why spend the energy on a title that's only going to sell, say, a couple of thousand units when they could focus on a title that's going to sell 10,000, 20,000, right? And so, with limited capacity at some of these vinyl pressing plants, I think that it might make sense for some of these labels to put more attention again on the mass appeal stuff, less attention on the lower appeal stuff. So one of the other things they can do if the vinyl market isn't growing as much is they can charge more, and therefore not artificially, but like they'll be bringing up their revenue or at least compensating for less demand by charging more, or potentially growing revenue, say faster than you're growing your unit sales, simply by charging more. And then the other thing that they could do if they wanted to is press less. So some of these titles that aren't going to sell as much, they're probably going to want to be damn sure that they sell out of them, especially from everything that we've seen this year. So I don't know about you, but the fact that you can get basically any Blue Note Classic Series release, any Blue Note Tone Poet release on Amazon a couple of months after its release date for like 30% off is like mind blowing to me, because in the past, these companies didn't discount almost ever. And now, whether it's Amazon, Blue Note did their own like 20% off. Vinyl Me Please was doing large like 30% off discounts for a while. It's crazy to me that these labels are doing this, but why they're doing it is because they have excess stock that they need to get rid of because it's probably taking up space in their warehouse. And they don't want it on the books for 2023. They'd rather sell it at a discount and make up maybe the revenue gap that they have compared to what they promised for this year. And so they're just trying to get rid of this stuff. And that is a really, really telling sort of trend in this market. The idea that if you wait, you can get discounted records, discounted new stuff. Don't get me wrong. It makes sense in almost any other industry. It just hasn't been the case in vinyl, and certainly not jazz vinyl in my memory. So I think that this is I think it's a symbol that the industry is freaking out a little bit, and I think again that they're going to have to make decisions about how they react in 2024, whether it means pressing less, charging more, finding new customers, and then tweaking exactly the types of titles that they decide to license and that they decide to release. So a little bit more of like an economic kind of lens here, I suppose, for some of my predictions for 2024. But those are some of the things I suppose that I think. So a few other things I suppose that that kind of occur to me from an economic standpoint, and even like a sort of macroeconomic and like international community kind of standpoint that I think is actually going to start to impact, if it hasn't already, is going to impact this hobby or this the vinyl industry a little bit. So one of the things is that a lot of companies right now are rethinking supply chains for a variety of reasons. I think part of it is the rising cost of energy, and that always happens when there's sort of like geopolitical instability around the world, and I think we're definitely seeing some of that. And I think that obviously you have inflation, at least that's cooling in the U.S., although not necessarily in some international markets. Interest rates are starting to go down, but the cost of living increases are still there. It just feels like there's a lot. There's a lot of these kind of things that are swirling around that are going to be impacting the vinyl industry. And one of the things that I think needs to happen and could possibly happen in 2024 is the industry could find a better way of getting titles, getting vinyl into the hands of international buyers. So right now, I think we all realize that, or probably a lot of us realize, especially if you sell records, it's difficult for a lot of folks in Europe to get their hands on certain titles. And I think sometimes it has to do with distribution rights and how it differs between the U.S. and Europe. But the other part, I think, is simply shipping. Um, the idea that all of this product comes to market in the U.S. and then has to be shipped to Europe, which is strange because a lot of the packaging and sometimes even the pressing actually occurs in Europe before it comes over to the U.S. I think that there has to be a better way because if the industry is going to be looking for new customers, and one of the ways of doing that is looking outside the United States, then why not simply make it easier? And what I mean, I suppose, is cheaper for international buyers to get their hands on some of these titles. And so I think that this is like a supply chain challenge that could be figured out in 2024 if the industry decides to prioritize it. Um, so I mentioned that the industry may consider charging more, and one of the ways that they may get around that is actually by putting out more special editions and deluxe sort of editions. What that's going to allow them to do is obviously charge more, get higher margins from the individual unit that they're selling. Um, and inevitably, they probably won't need to make as many either. So they essentially, what I'm getting at is it may end up being an avenue for them to justify not having there be like a cheaper costed item for a specific title. So think about like that Pharoah Sanders record that, what was it, like 45 or 60 bucks or something for the Indian Navigation reissue. There's a lot of people saying, I don't need the box. Why don't you just sell me the record? That's all that I want. And you can charge me like 30 or $35. I don't think I think they did this by design. I don't think that they had to do a box set. I think that they knew that there wouldn't be as many people who are going to buy it. So why not force people to buy it in a box set and inevitably make more money per unit and overall than if you sold, say, a cheaper edition and you got maybe a few more sales out of it. So I think it'll be interesting if we see maybe a little bit more of that. Otherwise, I don't know. I mentioned earlier that I think people are going to be spending less on vinyl. I think that that's the case. I think that people are going to be a little bit more choosy with what they decide to purchase. Now that the industry has kind of taught us that if you wait, you get a discount. I think that that may impact people's willingness to say jump on new titles. And some of these labels may have to do a little bit more work in order to get rid of their stock. And that's not necessarily the best thing because right now it's almost like a if you press it, they will come kind of mentality where they put out a record and everybody buys. If that's not the case and they have to start spending more money on marketing, that's inevitably going to raise the cost of these records as well. All right, so now let's move into the resolutions, and I promise I won't be as all over the place in this part of the discussion. So, first of all, an update, right, on the resolutions that I made for myself in 2023. Did I live up to them? So the first one was I said I was going to finish cataloging my collection in Discogs. At that point, I don't think I had more than maybe 800 records that were cataloged in Discogs. And I simply wanted to do it because I would always find myself in a store and unable to verify, not if I had something, because I have a pretty good idea of what I have. But the question was in what condition, and was I finding an upgrade or something like that. So I actually did do this. So I completed cataloging my collection in Discogs, and I updated on a week-to-week basis, so I always know exactly how many titles I have. So I've been doing pretty good with that. And in case you're wondering, that number now is 3,383 titles across 7-inch, 10-inch, and 12-inch. Mostly 12, right? I think I have, I forget. I might actually have a decent amount, maybe like 250 10-inch records, something like that. But otherwise, it's mostly 12-inch. So pretty proud of myself for doing that one. The next resolution that I made for myself is I said I want to sell 400 more records than I take in over the course of the year. So sell 400 more than what I've bought, or essentially a net loss, right? Net loss of 400. I didn't do that at all. Like I didn't even come close. My collection has only been growing in 2023, and this is a resolution that I am going to attempt to carry into 2024, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So the next one, the third resolution that I made for myself is I wanted to upgrade my turntable. I believe, and I've been told, that the weakest part of my system is my turntable. So I have a Marantz turntable that's from the 70s, just S arm. Like I've got just a basic moving magnet cartridge on it, and I have modern speakers, and I have these like Macintosh amplifier and preamp. And anyway, what people tell me is that my turntable is the weakest part of my system. And part of this is like maybe a little bit of peer pressure because I do hear this pretty often. Um, but I also kind of acknowledge that if I'm going to be spinning some of the stuff that I spin, I should probably be doing it on a little bit nicer setup. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm still not an equipment guy. I'm not going to be spending. I'm not even going to be spending like thousands of dollars on a turntable. Like, I'm sorry, I don't like spending money on equipment. But the thing, the turntable that I have is not that great. I acknowledge that, and I acknowledge that I'm going to have to spend over $1,000 on a nice turntable. Um, and fortunately enough, some of these goals end up meshing, right? So if I want to sell more records and I need to get the turntable, guess what? It's an easy way to fund it. All right, so that was number three. The fourth one is that I said that I wanted to post 75 YouTube videos, which is a little bit weird of a resolution because it's like producing content just to produce content. I didn't hit 75 this year. And in fact, actually earlier this year, as work was picking up, I almost took a little bit of a, not a hiatus, but I took like a couple of weeks off and I posted a video. Then I took a couple of weeks off and posted a video. More recently, I've gotten more into it, but I didn't hit the 75. The thing that I did do though, is I hit 100 overall videos, which I think is pretty good when you consider, I think I started in like September or August of last year. And, I didn't hit it, but that one doesn't bother me as much. So, first, let me address I do want to carry through my resolution from 2023, which is to purchase a turntable. I still want to do it. I need to start doing the research, kind of go through the process. I know a lot of folks have different recommendations based on the setups that they have, and I need to find something that is simultaneously probably more modern than what I have. It has to be for me. There has to be a discernible difference. I understand that speakers can make a big difference in terms of how a record can sound. And here's the thing: I even understand that a cartridge changeouts can make subtle differences, but the turntable, I mean, come on, it's it's a motor and it turns a platter. And I know that's a gross oversimplification, but I'm still of this mindset that like really like a turntable is going to make that much difference. A tone arm is going to make that much difference. The wires are what carry the sound, right? So like, a cartridge touches the record. I get that, but the thing that the cartridge is connected to, and like the motor that's turning the thing, I don't know. I just have a really hard time with this idea of spending a lot of money on a turntable. And believe me, I know I'm in the minority. I know a lot of people put a lot of value in or have a lot of value for a nice turntable, and I can point to things that are the reasons why. There's like this cognitive like block for me of like, why would I spend multiple thousands of dollars on a turntable when I feel like I should be prioritizing some of the other elements in the chain, right? That have more of a, in my perception, more of an impact, or more realistically an impact, right? Because so much of this stuff, people hear with their eyes. They do. Like they see a nice amplifier that they spent $50,000 on, and they're like, that right there is making this music right here sound better, and I can hear it. I don't know. I don't know. All right, so that's one. I want to upgrade my turntable. I do. All right, so the next one. Remember, last time I said I want to sell 400 more records than I take in. Um, um, or again, a net loss in my total collection, right? Net loss in terms of total. What I want to do now, because I just didn't even come close to that, right? In 2023, I want to have a situation in my record room where there's nothing on the floor. There's no vinyl that is stacked up on the floor. Not stacked up, but you know what I mean? Like in a bunch, like leaning up against something. I have that problem. It's pervasive, and I'd really like to have a clean record room because then I feel like I'm going to be able to better relax when there's not as much clutter. So that's what I want to do, is have a situation in that room that's going to be a combination, by the way, of selling stuff and selling even more than I thought I was going to have to sell. Maybe a slight shelving adjustment, but I don't think I can fit any more shelves. So it's going to have to be, I'm going to have to get rid of stuff. In fact, in January, I've been planning this already. I'm going to try to list like 500 records on eBay. I know that I know it's gonna take a while to like, prepare that listing, that like massive listing, but I want to sell just like a ton of stuff. And don't get me wrong, I'm not getting out of this hobby. I still have over 3,000 records. It's just that I have at least 500 records of fat in there. Okay, a lot of stuff I don't listen to anymore. A lot of duplicates. So I want to do that too. A third thing that I want to do is, and this is more of an ego thing. I want to upgrade my video recording quality right here on this medium, on this YouTube channel. I realize that there's a lot of folks out there who have like really clean images, and I'm jealous. And it's because they have these like nice, expensive cameras, and I'm still using my iPhone. So I want to, I want to get a nicer camera to record this stuff, because I enjoy making these videos, and funnily enough, I end up watching my own videos not because I not because I enjoy hearing myself talk. It's just to make sure that that I edited it okay, and that I didn't completely misspeak, and to the extent that I have to correct things with little text underneath the screen, which I sometimes have to do because I don't want to reshoot stuff. But I think I could do a better job, and be a little bit, I could come to the plate a little bit better in terms of these videos, in terms of the quality, both of audio as well as video. All right, so this last resolution, I'm almost going to pose this as a question because I don't have a full answer for this thing. So something that occurs to me is that as a vinyl collector, not really adding anything to the world, right? Like there's nothing, like I'm only taking, for the most part. I'm buying records that other people created, and I'm listening to it. And that's kind of it. And I'm always thinking about what could I do that's like leaving something, right, that's related to this hobby that I feel so passionate about. And so, for example, some record collectors end up getting into, like, they form their own label and they start reissuing stuff themselves, or finding new artists, putting out music, right? And sometimes that does start in this vinyl collecting hobby. Another one is books. So there are people now who are publishing books, whether specifically about the vinyl market or about the history of labels, and they're trying to put something out there. Sometimes in picture books, sometimes there's people that are writing biographies right now that I know, specific to musicians and things like that. And there's there's a lot of creative people out there who are doing something with their passion. And the nearest that I can say that I've done is created this YouTube channel to talk about music. And I feel like that's not enough. That's not enough for me. I want to do something more, and I don't know what it is yet. I've given thought to, trying to do some type of book based on the fact that I have, like I have the entire Bethlehem catalog, and I also happen to have a lot of Burt Goldblatt, who's the photographer for a ton of those album covers. I have a lot of his original negatives that I've printed and I have on the walls of my record room. And might there be something that I could do with these two things? This idea that, I have the covers, and then I have some of his photography. But again, I'm just like spitballing. I'm trying to figure out, what it is that I could do that would be like a fun activity as well as leaving something. It doesn't need to be a moneymaker. It just has to be something I think that would feel like it was worthwhile, and that I was, again, contributing to this space that I feel so much passion for. And I think one of the ways that I can sort of give back, right, is talking up artists or talking up releases that come out that I feel particularly passionate about, especially because I don't get compensated for for doing so. And so it's not like it's not a job. It really does feel like I have the ability to help an artist out kind of thing just by talking about them. And I do get some sort of personal value from that, but I just feel like there's more. And so need some ideas. Need some ideas from all of you out there in the vinyl community. Ideas that are really good that you're not going to do yourself. Let me know those. All right, so that's it. So those are my predictions and my resolutions for 2024, and we'll see what unfolds as the year goes. Maybe I'll do an update or something mid-year, and I'll let you know whether I'm actually able to get rid of some of these records that are piling up. So thanks very much. I hope everyone had a great 2023, and I hope everyone has a great start to 2024. I'll see you next time.